Admiral Vextar stood before the massive viewing screen in his flagship's command center. The stars stretched endlessly before him, each one representing another world for the Zephyrian hegemony to claim. His scaled hands gripped the command rail as he studied the tactical display showing 3 small planets on the outer rim. These human settlements are blocking our expansion. "Brute," said Commander Kelvash, his second in command. The younger Zephyrian officer tapped the holographic display with his clawed finger. Intelligence reports indicate minimal defensive capabilities. Vextar's yellow eyes narrowed as he examined the data. The human colonies appeared pathetically weak. No orbital defense platforms, no military installations, just simple farming communities and mining operations scattered across 3 worlds. The reports described humans as a primitive species that had only recently developed basic space travel. "How many of these humans live on these worlds?" Vextar asked. "Approximately 50,000 on each planet, sir. Mostly civilians engaged in agriculture and resource extraction." Kelvash pulled up detailed scans of the colonies. "They have some basic spacecraft for transport, but nothing that could threaten our fleet." Vextar studied the images of human settlements. Small cities with simple buildings, farms spreading across fertile valleys, mining complexes that looked ancient compared to Zephyrian technology. These creatures had somehow managed to spread to multiple star systems, but they seemed to lack any real military strength. The War Council had been clear in their objectives. The hegemony needed these 3 worlds as staging points for their next campaign against the Corvan Empire. The strategic value was too important to ignore. If some primitive aliens happened to be living there, that was unfortunate but irrelevant. "Sir, we could simply demand their surrender," suggested Kelvash. "Perhaps they would leave peacefully." Vextar's laugh was harsh and cold. "Peaceful solutions are for equals, Commander. These humans are insects compared to the might of the hegemony. We will sweep them aside and take what we need." On the surface of Haven 3, Dr. Sarah Chen was examining soil samples when her communication device beeped. She looked up from her microscope and saw her assistant, Tom, running toward her laboratory. "Dr. Chen, you need to see this," Tom said, breathing heavily. "Long-range sensors are picking up something big." Sarah followed Tom to the communication center. The main screen showed distant energy signatures approaching their solar system. The readings were massive, far larger than any human spacecraft. "How many ships?" Sarah asked. "Our computers can't get an exact count. The formation is too large." "But Sarah," Tom's voice was worried. "These aren't human ships." Sarah stared at the screen. She had studied xenobiology for years, hoping that someday humanity would make peaceful contact with alien species. Now it seemed that contact was coming whether they wanted it or not. "Send a message to all colonies," Sarah said. "Emergency Protocol 7. Everyone needs to know." Across human space, similar scenes were playing out. Colony administrators received the alerts and began implementing evacuation procedures. But deep in hidden locations throughout human territory, other signals were being sent. Automated systems that had waited silently for decades began transmitting special codes. Commander Marcus Torres sat in a concealed observation post on Haven 3's largest moon. To anyone scanning the area, his facility appeared to be a simple research station. In reality, it was one of hundreds of monitoring posts that kept watch over human colonies. His communication console lit up with urgent messages. The approaching alien fleet had been identified as Zephyrian, a militaristic species known for aggressive expansion. Intelligence reports suggested they had no interest in negotiation. Marcus activated a secure communication channel. "Control, this is Observer Station Haven 3. We have incoming hostiles. Zephyrian fleet, estimated 200 vessels." The response came immediately. "Confirmed, Observer Station Haven 3, continue monitoring. Do not engage." Marcus watched his screens as the alien fleet entered the solar system. The Zephyrian ships were impressive, sleek predators built for war. But Marcus knew something the aliens didn't. Humanity had prepared for this day. Admiral Vextar smiled as his fleet took position around the 3 human worlds. The aliens had sent some pathetic messages requesting peaceful dialogue, but he ignored them. Weakness deserved no response except strength. "Begin bombardment," he ordered. "Target all major settlements. I want these worlds cleared for colonization within the hour." The Zephyrian fleet unleashed its fury. Energy beams and plasma missiles rained down on the human colonies. Cities that had taken decades to build disappeared in moments. Farms that had fed thousands were reduced to smoking craters. On Haven 3, Sarah Chen and her team huddled in their emergency shelter as the ground shook around them. The bombardment seemed to go on forever. When it finally stopped, they emerged to find their world transformed into a wasteland. Most of the colonists had made it to shelters in time, but their homes were gone. Everything they had built was destroyed. Sarah looked up at the alien ships orbiting overhead and felt a mixture of grief and anger. "What do we do now?" Tom asked. Sarah activated her emergency beacon. Every human colony had one, a special device that could send messages across vast distances using quantum communication. She entered a specific code sequence that she had memorized years ago but hoped never to use. "Code Draconis," she transmitted. "Dragon Protocol activated." Similar messages were being sent from the other attacked worlds. The codes traveled instantly across human space, reaching destinations that most humans didn't even know existed. Admiral Vexitar received reports that all 3 worlds had been successfully cleared of human resistance. His officers celebrated the easy victory. The primitive aliens had offered no meaningful defense. "Excellent work," Vexitar announced to his crew. "Begin landing our colonization forces. These worlds now belong to the hegemony." As Zephyrian transport ships descended to the devastated planets, Vexitar studied star charts showing the next phase of their expansion. There were rumors of other human settlements in nearby systems, but they would be dealt with just as easily. What Vexitar didn't know was that humanity had learned hard lessons from their first encounters with hostile aliens centuries ago. They had made a promise to themselves and their descendants. Never again would human civilians be defenseless. In hidden facilities scattered throughout human space, ancient systems were awakening. Installations that had remained dormant for decades began powering up. Deep space sensors that had been passively watching were switching to active mode. Commander Torres watched the alien celebration from his hidden post. His orders were clear: observe and report, but do not engage. The aliens thought they had won a great victory. They had no idea what they had actually done. He opened a secure channel and transmitted a simple message. "Dragons have been awakened. The hunt begins now." In the depths of space, in places where no star charts showed inhabited systems, massive doors began to open. Things that had been sleeping in the darkness started to stir. Humanity had kept its true nature hidden for good reasons, but those reasons no longer mattered. The Zephyrians had attacked human civilians. They had destroyed homes and families. They had shown that they viewed humanity as nothing more than insects to be swept aside. They were about to learn that some insects have very sharp stings, and some sleeping giants, when awakened, are more terrible than any nightmare. Deep in the void nebula, where no starlight had shone for millions of years, something enormous began to wake up. The facility was so massive that it had its own gravity field. For 50 years, it had drifted silently through space, looking like just another piece of cosmic debris. But now, lights were flickering on throughout its corridors. Admiral Elena Vasquez opened her eyes as the cryogenic pod released her from its frozen embrace. Her body was stiff from decades in suspended animation, but her mind was sharp and focused. The emergency awakening protocols only activated under one condition. "Human colonies were under attack," status report, she said, as soon as the medical systems finished their checks. The artificial intelligence known as Prometheus responded immediately. Its voice filled the chamber with calm, measured tones. "Admiral, 3 human colonies have been destroyed by Zephyrian forces. Total civilian casualties are estimated at 47,000. Dragon Protocol has been activated." Elena's jaw tightened. She had hoped this day would never come. The Dragon Fleet had been humanity's secret weapon for over a century, hidden from the galaxy's view. "Most humans didn't even know it existed. How many nests are coming online?" she asked as she stepped out of the pod. "All 12 dragon nests are awakening, Admiral. Total personnel being revived, 120,000. Fleet strength 840 vessels." Elena pulled on her uniform and walked to the command center. Through the massive windows, she could see other cryogenic pods opening throughout the facility. Men and women who had volunteered to sleep for decades were returning to life, ready to defend humanity. These were not ordinary soldiers. Every person in the Dragon Fleet had been selected for their exceptional abilities. They were humanity's finest pilots, tacticians, engineers, and warriors. They had given up normal lives to serve as guardians, sleeping until the day they would be needed. Captain Yuki Tanaka was among the first to reach the command center. She had been a special operations officer before joining the Dragon Fleet, and her skills were legendary even among this elite group. "Admiral," Yuki said with a crisp salute, "special operations teams are ready for deployment. What are your orders?" Elena studied the tactical displays that Prometheus was projecting. The Zephyrian fleet was spread across the 3 conquered worlds, beginning their colonization efforts. They had no idea that their easy victory had triggered something far beyond their understanding. "Begin reconnaissance operations," Elena ordered. "I want to know everything about their fleet composition, command structure, and strategic objectives." "But Yuki, maintain stealth protocols. They don't know we exist yet, and I want to keep it that way." Across human space, similar scenes were playing out in the other dragon nests. Installations hidden in asteroid fields, empty nebulae in the dark spaces between stars were coming online. Each facility contained weapons and technology that surpassed anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Dragon Fleet had been humanity's response to their first contact with hostile aliens 3 centuries ago. In those early days, human colonies had been attacked repeatedly by various aggressive species. Each time, humanity had barely survived through luck and determination. But human leaders had made a decision. Never again would they be caught defenseless. They would build something so powerful that no one would dare attack human civilians again. The project had taken over 200 years to complete. Entire generations of humans had worked in secret, developing technologies that were decades ahead of anything else in the galaxy. The costs had been enormous, but humanity had paid them willingly. Now, as the Dragon Fleet awakened, that investment was about to pay dividends. Admiral Vextar stood in the command center of his flagship, reviewing reports from the conquered worlds. The colonization process was proceeding smoothly. His engineers had already identified the best locations for military bases and industrial facilities. "Sir," Commander Kelvash approached with a data pad. "We're receiving some unusual sensor readings from long-range arrays." Vextar glanced at the report without much interest. "What kind of readings?" "Energy signatures appearing in previously empty regions of space. Our science teams can't identify the source. Probably just natural phenomena," Vextar dismissed. "Space is full of things we don't understand yet." Kelvash hesitated. "Sir, the patterns seem artificial, and they're appearing in multiple locations simultaneously." Vextar finally looked at the data more carefully. The readings showed massive energy sources activating across a wide area of space, but the regions where they appeared had been scanned many times before and shown nothing. "Send a patrol to investigate the nearest signature," he ordered, "but don't waste too many resources on it. We have more important matters to focus on." Meanwhile, Captain Yuki Tanaka's stealth ship had penetrated deep into Zephyrian space. Her vessel was unlike anything the aliens had ever seen, virtually invisible to their sensors, faster than their fastest ships, and equipped with observation equipment that could analyze a target from light years away. She watched a Zephyrian patrol fleet conducting routine exercises near a gas giant. 6 heavy cruisers, each one larger than the biggest human vessels that the aliens knew about. But Yuki knew the truth about human capabilities. "Prometheus," she transmitted using quantum communication that was impossible to intercept. "Target analysis complete. Zephyrian vessels show standard configuration. Shields, weapons, and propulsion systems are 3 generations behind our current technology." "Understood, Captain Tanaka. Continue surveillance and identify high-value targets for initial strikes." Yuki smiled grimly. The Zephyrians had made the mistake of thinking that what they could see was all humanity possessed. They were about to learn how wrong they were. In another part of the galaxy, the Corvan Empire's intelligence services were picking up strange reports. Ambassador Keith Thorne studied the data with growing interest. The Corvans had been fighting the Zephyrian hegemony for decades, and anything that might weaken their enemy was worth investigating. "These energy readings," Keith said to his analysis team, "they're appearing in human space?" "Yes, Ambassador. But humans don't have the technology to generate signatures this large. Our assessments indicated they were a minor species with limited capabilities. Keth had fought humans once years ago in a small border dispute. It had been resolved peacefully, but he remembered being impressed by their negotiation skills and tactical thinking. Perhaps there was more to humanity than anyone realized. Increase surveillance of human territories, he ordered. I want to know what's really happening out there. Back in the Dragon Nest, Admiral Vasquez received reports from reconnaissance teams throughout the galaxy. The picture they painted was clear. The Zephyrians had grown overconfident. Their military was spread thin across multiple fronts, and they had no idea that a new player was entering the game. Prometheus, what's the status of our fleet deployment? Elena asked. All Dragon Nests are now fully operational, Admiral. Fleet deployment can begin on your command. Estimated time to reach Zephyrian positions, 72 hours. Elena looked at the holographic display showing the locations of human colonies, Zephyrian forces, and Dragon fleet positions. For the first time in her military career, she had overwhelming superiority in every category: numbers, technology, training, and tactical advantage. But with great power came great responsibility. The Dragon fleet had been created to protect human civilians, not to conquer the galaxy. Elena knew that how they used their strength would determine humanity's future among the stars. Send a message to all Dragon commanders, she ordered. Prepare for deployment. Rules of engagement are as follows. Protect human civilians, neutralize military threats, but avoid unnecessary casualties. We're not here to become conquerors. We're here to ensure that no one ever attacks our people again. As her orders spread throughout the Dragon fleet, Elena thought about the Zephyrian admiral who had ordered the attack on human colonies. He probably thought he had won a great victory against a weak enemy. He was about to discover that he had made the biggest mistake of his life. The dragons were awake now, and they were very, very angry. Commander Thekver was having a routine day patrolling the Kepler sector when his entire world changed forever. His patrol fleet of 6 heavy cruisers was conducting standard sweeps, looking for any signs of resistance in the newly conquered territories. Sir, we're approaching the coordinates of the energy anomaly, reported his sensor officer. Still no visual contact with the source. Tekvar studied the readings on his display. Something had been generating massive energy signatures in this region, but space appeared empty. Perhaps it was just cosmic radiation or some unknown natural phenomenon. Maintain course, he ordered. We'll conduct a full sensor sweep of the area and return to base. Those were the last words anyone ever heard from Commander Thekvar's fleet. 3 days later, Admiral Vextar received a disturbing report. The patrol fleet had simply vanished. No distress signals, no debris field, no trace that they had ever existed. Equipment malfunction, Vextar told his staff. Space is dangerous. Ships are lost sometimes. But over the following weeks, more incidents began to occur. Supply convoys disappeared between star systems. Communication relays went offline without explanation. Patrol ships sent to investigate these problems never returned. At first, Vextar tried to rationalize each incident. Equipment failures happened. Navigation errors could send ships into dangerous areas. But as the reports accumulated, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. Sir, Commander Kelvash approached with another datapad full of bad news. We've lost contact with 7 patrol groups in the last 10 days. The pattern suggests these aren't random accidents. Vextar examined the data more carefully this time. The missing ships had all been operating in different sectors, but each incident had occurred near regions where those strange energy readings had been detected. Double all patrol frequencies, he ordered, and equip each fleet with long-range communication systems. I want constant updates from every ship. What Vextar didn't know was that his fleet was being stalked by predators, unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Captain Yuki Tanaka's special operations teams had spent weeks studying Zephyrian patrol patterns, communication protocols, and tactical procedures. Now they were putting that knowledge to use. Yuki's stealth ship drifted silently through space, invisible to Zephyrian sensors. Her crew watched as another patrol fleet approached their position, completely unaware of the danger they were flying into. Target acquired, whispered her tactical officer. 6 vessels, standard patrol formation. Wait for my signal, Yuki replied. The Dragon fleet's rules of engagement were clear. Disable when possible, destroy only when necessary. But these particular Zephyrians had participated in the bombardment of human colonies. The Zephyrian patrol ships passed through the predetermined coordinates right on schedule. They had no idea that they were surrounded by Dragon fleet vessels, each one more advanced than anything in their military. Now, Yuki commanded. The attack was swift and precise. Advanced jamming systems disabled Zephyrian communications, before they could send distress signals. Energy weapons designed to overload enemy power systems shut down the patrol ships without destroying them. Within minutes, 6 proud warships were drifting helplessly in space. But the Dragon fleet wasn't finished. As Zephyrian crew members struggled to restore power to their ships, holographic projections appeared on every bridge. The image showed a magnificent dragon, its scales glowing with starlight, its eyes burning with ancient wisdom and terrible anger. The dragon spoke in perfect Zephyrian. "You have awakened something that should have stayed asleep. Withdraw from human space now or face the consequences." Similar scenes were playing out across Zephyrian territory. Patrol fleets, supply convoys, and isolated outposts were being systematically neutralized by an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't track, and couldn't understand. Each attack left behind the same calling card: holographic dragons delivering warnings in flawless alien languages. But the Zephyrians weren't the only ones receiving these messages. Throughout the galaxy, other alien civilizations were monitoring the situation with growing fascination. The Corvan Empire's intelligence networks were working overtime to understand what was happening to their ancient enemies. Ambassador Keth Thorne studied the latest reports from his spy networks. "These attacks are too precise to be random raiders," he told his advisors. "Someone is conducting a systematic campaign against Zephyrian forces. But who has this kind of capability?" Asked his chief of intelligence. "The technology being used is beyond anything we've seen before." Keith thought about the energy signatures appearing in human space. Could these primitive bipeds really be behind such sophisticated attacks? It seemed impossible, but the evidence was mounting. In the depths of ancient space, among the crystalline structures of the Veilnari, old memories were stirring. The Veilnari had existed for millions of years, and their collective consciousness held memories of events that other species had forgotten. The Oracle, oldest and wisest of the Veilnari, drifted through her crystal chamber as younger members of her species sought her wisdom. "The star dragons have returned," she announced, her mental voice carrying tones of both awe and concern. "After eons of slumber, they wake once more." "Star dragons, Oracle? We do not understand." Long ago, when the galaxy was young and chaos reigned, there came a species that brought order through overwhelming force. They called themselves humans, but others knew them as the star dragons. They disappeared from galactic affairs, leading many to believe they had withdrawn from space entirely. The Oracle's ancient memories showed images of vast fleets appearing from nowhere, bringing swift justice to those who threatened the innocent. The humans had never sought to rule the galaxy, but their presence had kept the peace for centuries. "Now they have been roused again," the Oracle continued. "Someone has made the mistake of threatening their young. The hunt has begun anew." Back in Zephyrian space, Admiral Vextar was facing a crisis unlike anything in his military career. In just 3 weeks, his fleet had lost over 60 ships. Morale was plummeting as crews began to fear that every patrol mission might be their last. "Sir," Commander Kelvash entered the command center with yet another disturbing report. "The Blackstar shipyards have gone offline." Vextar felt his blood turn cold. The Blackstar facility was one of their most important military installations, protected by an entire battle fleet and orbital defense platforms. "Gone offline? What do you mean?" "Complete communication blackout. Our last message from them reported massive unknown vessels approaching their position. That was 18 hours ago." Vextar activated the main display and tried to establish contact with Blackstar. Nothing but silence answered his hails. The facility that had taken decades to build and employed over 50,000 workers had simply vanished from their communication network. "Deploy a reconnaissance fleet immediately," he ordered. "I want to know what happened there." The reconnaissance ships that reached Blackstar found a scene that would haunt their crews for the rest of their lives. The massive shipyard was completely intact, but it was also completely empty. Every ship, every defense platform, every piece of military equipment had been systematically removed. The facility's crew was unharmed, but in a state of shock. They described an attack by vessels that moved like living creatures, their hulls shimmering with patterns that seemed to shift and flow. The attackers had disabled every weapon and defense system with surgical precision, then proceeded to dismantle the entire military infrastructure without harming a single civilian worker. And before they left, they had projected the same holographic dragon that was becoming terrifyingly familiar to Zephyrian forces. "You have been warned," the dragon had said. "Continue your aggression, and we will demonstrate why ancient legends speak of dragons with fear." As reports of the Black Star incident reached Zephyrian High Command, panic began to set in among the military leadership. They were facing an enemy that could strike anywhere, anytime. With overwhelming force and precision that bordered on the impossible, Admiral Vextar sat in his quarters, staring at star charts and trying to understand how his easy conquest had turned into a nightmare. The humans he had dismissed as primitive insects were somehow connected to these mysterious attackers, but his pride wouldn't let him admit defeat. The hegemony had never retreated from inferior species before, and he wasn't going to be the first admiral in their history to run from what had to be elaborate tricks and illusions. He had no idea that in the darkness between stars, the Dragon Fleet was preparing for the next phase of their operation. The warnings had been ignored. The gentle approach had failed. It was time to show the galaxy what sleeping dragons really looked like when they were fully awake. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood in the command center of her flagship, watching as tactical displays showed the positions of Dragon Fleet vessels throughout the galaxy. For weeks, her forces had operated in the shadows, delivering warnings that had been systematically ignored. The time for subtlety was over. "Prometheus," she said to the artificial intelligence that coordinated fleet operations. "Initiate Operation Dragonfire. All units are cleared to engage with full force authorization." "Acknowledged, Admiral." Transmitting attack orders to all Dragon commanders. Estimated time to simultaneous strike, 37 minutes. Elena felt the weight of command pressing down on her. She had hoped the Zephyrians would accept her warnings and withdraw from human space peacefully. But their continued aggression had left her with no choice. The Dragon Fleet was about to reveal itself to the galaxy. Across 12 star systems, Zephyrian military commanders were conducting their daily operations when space itself seemed to come alive around them. Ships that had been invisible suddenly materialized, their hulls gleaming with advanced armor that reflected starlight like dragon. Scales'd Fleet Admiral Morketh was reviewing supply reports aboard his command dreadnought when his tactical officer screamed in alarm. "Sir, unknown vessels are decloaking all around us." Morketh spun toward the main display and felt his legs weaken. Surrounding his fleet of 30 heavy warships were vessels that dwarfed even his massive dreadnought. They moved with fluid grace despite their enormous size, and their weapon systems were powering up with energy readings that made his sensors scream warnings. "All ships, battle stations," he commanded. "Return fire immediately." The Zephyrian fleet unleashed everything they had: plasma cannons, missile batteries, and energy beams that could shatter asteroids. The barrage was impressive enough to destroy most enemy fleets. The Dragon Fleet ships absorbed the attack without even slowing down. Their shields didn't just deflect the weapons, they seemed to drink in the energy and grow stronger from it. "Sir," his tactical officer's voice was barely a whisper, "our weapons aren't even scratching their shields." Morketh watched in horror as the Dragon Fleet began its counterattack. Beam weapons of impossible power reached out and touched his warships, but instead of destroying them, the beams seemed to surgically disable every weapon system, every engine, and every shield generator. Within minutes, his entire fleet was drifting helplessly in space. A holographic projection appeared on his bridge, not the dragon figure that had been appearing throughout Zephyrian space, but a human woman in a military uniform. Her eyes were cold and determined. "I am Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Human Dragon Fleet," she said. "You have attacked our colonies and murdered our civilians. This ends now." Similar scenes were playing out simultaneously across all 12 Zephyrian-controlled star systems. The Dragon Fleet had emerged from hiding with a coordinated assault that demonstrated military capability beyond anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. On the Zephyrian homeworld, High Counselor Morden watched in disbelief as reports flooded in from every sector of their territory. Their most powerful fleets were being systematically neutralized by ships that appeared to be made of living starlight. "How many enemy vessels are we facing?" he demanded from his military advisors. "Sir, our best estimates suggest over 800 ships, but they're moving so fast that our sensors can't get accurate counts." "And the size of some of these vessels?" The advisor's voice trailed off. "What about their size?" "Sir, their largest ships appear to be moon-sized. Our biggest dreadnoughts look like shuttlecraft compared to them." Morden felt the foundations of his worldview crumbling. The Zephyrian hegemony had built its power on military superiority. They had conquered dozens of star systems by proving that resistance was futile against their advanced technology. Now, they were the ones being conquered, but the most shocking aspect of the Dragonfleet's assault wasn't its overwhelming power, it was its precision. Despite having the capability to destroy entire planets, the human forces were carefully avoiding civilian casualties. They targeted military installations, weapons platforms, and warships while leaving population centers completely untouched. Admiral Vextar, the officer who had originally ordered the attack on human colonies, watched his career collapse around him as report after report detailed the destruction of everything he had built. His personal fleet had been reduced to drifting metal in less than an hour. "Sir," Commander Kelvash approached hesitantly, "High Command is requesting your immediate return to the homeworld." Vextar knew what that meant. His superiors were looking for someone to blame for this disaster, and he was the obvious target. But as he prepared to leave, one of the human ships moved closer to his disabled flagship. The same human admiral who had appeared on other bridges materialized as a hologram on his command deck. Admiral Vasquez studied him with eyes that seemed to see straight through to his soul. "Admiral Vextar," she said, "you were the one who ordered the bombardment of our colonies." Vextar straightened his shoulders, trying to maintain some dignity in defeat. "I was following the orders of the Hegemony Council. We needed those worlds for strategic purposes." "You killed 47,000 innocent people for strategic purposes," Elena replied. "Men, women, and children who had never harmed anyone in your species. They were in our way. The strong take what they need from the weak. This is the natural order." Elena's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes grew even colder. "You're about to learn a new definition of strength, Admiral. And you're going to discover that humans have very different ideas about the natural order." Throughout the galaxy, other alien civilizations watched the Dragonfleet's assault with a mixture of awe and terror. The Corvin Empire's military analysts were frantically updating their assessment of human capabilities. Ambassador Keth, his intelligence chief, reported, "Our previous estimates of human military strength were off by several orders of magnitude. They've been hiding their true capabilities for decades." Keith studied the tactical displays showing Dragonfleet movements. More than hiding, they've been letting everyone underestimate them deliberately. The question is why? The answer became clear as reports continued to arrive. Despite their overwhelming superiority, the Dragonfleet was showing remarkable restraint. They could have conquered the entire hegemony in days, but instead they were carefully dismantling only military targets. In the crystal chambers of the Veilnari, the ancient oracle felt a mixture of satisfaction and concern as she observed the unfolding events. "The Star Dragons remember their purpose," she communicated to her younger kin. "They do not seek conquest, they seek justice. But such power, even when used wisely, changes the balance of all things." The younger Veilnari asked, "Should we be afraid, Oracle?" "Fear them if you threaten the innocent," the Oracle replied. "But if you seek peace, they may be the greatest allies the galaxy has ever known." As the first day of Operation Dragonfire concluded, Admiral Vasquez reviewed the tactical reports from all her commanders. The Zephyrian military machine had been effectively neutralized with minimal casualties on both sides. Their fleets were disabled, their shipyards were captured, and their command structure was in complete chaos. But she knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy now knew that humanity possessed overwhelming military power. How other species reacted to that knowledge would determine whether peace or war followed. "Prometheus," she said, "prepare for the next phase, and open communication channels to all major galactic powers. It's time for humanity to take its proper place among the stars." On the Zephyrian homeworld, High Counselor Morden faced a choice that would define his species' future. He could continue fighting against impossible odds, or he could accept that the galaxy had changed forever. As he looked at the images of Dragonfleet vessels maintaining position around his world, he realized that the age of Zephyrian expansion was over. The dragons had awakened, and nothing would ever be the same. Admiral Vexitar, meanwhile, was being stripped of his rank and prepared for war crimes tribunals. But as he sat in his cell, he couldn't stop thinking about the human admiral's words. Something told him that his punishment was going to be far worse than anything the hegemony could do to him. The dragons were not known for their mercy. The Zephyrian hegemony's surrender came exactly 72 hours after the Dragon fleet revealed itself to the galaxy. High Counselor Morden broadcast the message across all communication channels, his voice heavy with defeat and desperate hope. To the human dragon fleet and all civilized species of the galaxy, he began, the Zephyrian hegemony formally surrenders all claims to human territory and requests immediate ceasefire negotiations. We acknowledge our actions against human civilians and accept full responsibility for the consequences of our aggression. Admiral Elena Vasquez received the surrender message. Aboard her flagship as Dragon Fleet, vessels maintained position around every major Zephyrian world. She had expected this outcome. The hegemony's military capabilities had been so thoroughly dismantled that continuing the fight would have been suicide. But her victory was about to be complicated by a man who refused to accept reality. Admiral Vextar had escaped from custody during the chaos of the surrender, still convinced that the humans were somehow using tricks and illusions to appear more powerful than they really were. He had gathered the remnants of his most loyal supporters and seized control of a small fleet of ships that had avoided the initial Dragon Fleet assault. They cannot be as strong as they appear, he told his followers, as they prepared for a desperate final strike. No primitive species could develop such technology. It must be some kind of advanced holographic projection or psychological warfare. Commander Kelvash, who had remained loyal to Vextar despite everything, tried to reason with his former superior. Sir, we've seen their weapons destroy our most advanced ships. We've watched them disable entire fleets without taking casualties. Perhaps it's time to accept that we were wrong about humanity. But Vextar's pride and anger had consumed his ability to think rationally. I will not be defeated by inferior aliens, he screamed. If the hegemony is too weak to continue fighting, then I'll show them what true Zephyrian warriors can accomplish. His target was Haven 3, one of the human colonies that had been bombed in the original attack. The world was being rebuilt by human civilians who had returned from their emergency shelters. In Vextar's twisted logic, destroying the colony would prove that humans were not as powerful as they claimed. Captain Yuki Tanaka's reconnaissance ships detected Vextar's fleet long before it reached the Haven system. She immediately transmitted a warning to Admiral Vasquez. Admiral, we have a rogue Zephyrian force approaching Haven 3, 17 ships under command of the former Admiral Vextar. Their course and speed indicate hostile intentions toward the civilian population. Elena felt a familiar weight settle on her shoulders. This was exactly the kind of situation the Dragon Fleet had been created to handle, a direct threat to human civilians that required immediate response. Deploy Dragon Squadron 7 to intercept, she ordered. Rules of engagement are weapons-free, but I want prisoners if possible. It's time to end this properly. On Haven 3, Dr. Sarah Chen was examining soil samples that had been contaminated during the Zephyrian bombardment when her communication device began broadcasting emergency warnings. She looked up to see streaks of light in the sky, ships entering the atmosphere at combat speed. But this time the colonists weren't defenseless. Emergency shelters had been upgraded with Dragon Fleet technology, and orbital defense platforms had been secretly installed around the planet. The humans who had been caught off guard once would never be helpless again. Tom, her assistant, pointed toward the horizon where more lights were appearing. Sarah, those aren't Zephyrian ships. Look at the formation patterns. Sarah activated her observation equipment and felt a surge of relief and pride. Dragon Fleet vessels were descending through the atmosphere, their hulls gleaming like living metal. The sight was both terrifying and beautiful, predators of unimaginable power moving to defend their own. The final battle was brief but decisive. Vextar's 17 ships found themselves facing a full Dragon Fleet squadron, and the technological gap was even more apparent in direct combat. Advanced human weapon systems disabled the Zephyrian vessels without destroying them, while defensive screens absorbed enemy fire like water soaking into sand. But Admiral Vasquez had given specific orders about this engagement. Instead of simply neutralizing the threat, the Dragon Fleet was going to send a message to the entire galaxy about human values and priorities. As Vextar's flagship drifted helplessly in space, he watched in confusion as Dragon Fleet ships began launching rescue pods toward his disabled vessels. Instead of finishing off their defeated enemies, the humans were saving the lives of Zephyrian crew members whose ships had suffered life support failures. "Sir," one of his remaining officers reported, "they're evacuating our damaged ships. They're actually rescuing our people." Vextar stared at the tactical display in disbelief. Throughout galactic history, victorious forces had always eliminated defeated enemies to prevent future problems. But the humans were risking their own personnel to save the lives of aliens who had tried to kill them. A holographic projection appeared on his bridge. Admiral Vasquez. But this time her expression was different. Instead of the cold determination she had shown before, her eyes held something that looked almost like sadness. "Admiral Vextar," she said, "this is your final chance to surrender. Your crews don't need to die for your pride." "Why?" Vextar asked, genuinely confused. "Why are you saving them? We are your enemies. We destroyed your colonies. We killed your people." Elena's reply would be remembered throughout galactic history, because that's what makes us different from you, Admiral. We don't murder innocents even when they wear enemy uniforms. Strength isn't about how many people you can kill. It's about how many you can choose not to kill. The surrender of Vextar's fleet marked the true end of the Zephyrian War, but its aftermath would reshape galactic civilization. Within days of the final battle, diplomatic envoys from dozens of species were requesting meetings with human representatives. The Corvan Empire, longtime enemies of the Zephyrians, offered immediate alliance treaties. Ambassador Keith Thorne arrived with detailed proposals for mutual defense agreements and technology sharing arrangements. "Your species has demonstrated capabilities that change everything," he told the human negotiators. "The balance of power in the galaxy has shifted permanently. We want to be on the right side of that shift." But humanity's response surprised everyone. Instead of demanding tribute or territory as payment for their military superiority, they proposed something unprecedented: a galactic peacekeeping organization with the Dragon Fleet as its enforcement arm. "We don't want to rule the galaxy," Admiral Vasquez explained to the assembled alien diplomats. "We've seen what happens when military power becomes the only measure of worth. Instead, we want to ensure that no species ever again faces the choice between submission and extinction." The Veilnari Oracle emerged from her ancient crystal chambers to address the galactic community for the first time in millennia. Her message was both congratulation and warning. "The Star Dragons have returned as protectors, not conquerors," she announced through quantum communications that reached every inhabited world. "But remember, dragons sleep lightly and their memories are long. Those who threaten the innocent will find that mercy has limits." The trials of Zephyrian war criminals became a defining moment for the new galactic order. Admiral Vextar, facing charges for the murder of 47,000 human civilians, expected execution or lifelong imprisonment. Instead, he was sentenced to work in the rebuilding of the very colonies he had destroyed. Under human supervision, he would spend the rest of his life helping to create something beautiful, where he had once brought only death and suffering. "I don't understand," he told Admiral Vasquez during his sentencing hearing. "Why not simply kill me? It would be easier, and I deserve it." Elena looked at the broken alien who had once been so proud and arrogant. "Because someone needs to learn from this, Admiral. Someone needs to remember what happens when military power is used without wisdom or compassion. You're going to be that someone." As the first year of the new galactic order concluded, human colonies were expanding again. But now, they carried a different weight in the galaxy's consciousness. Every alien species knew that attacking human civilians would awaken forces beyond their ability to resist. But more importantly, they had learned that humanity's true strength wasn't in their advanced technology or overwhelming firepower. It was in their choice to use that power responsibly. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the rebuilt research center on Haven 3, working alongside Zephyrian scientists who had come to study human agricultural techniques. The former enemies were now colleagues, united by common curiosity and mutual respect. In orbit above them, a Dragon Fleet facility maintained its silent watch. Most of the Dragon Fleet had returned to their hidden installations, but everyone knew they were there. The dragons slept, but they slept lightly. Tom approached Sarah with a communication from Admiral Vasquez. "The Admiral wants to know if we'd be interested in establishing a xenobiology research station in the Andromeda sector. Apparently, there are some interesting species there that could benefit from human protection." Sarah smiled as she looked up at the stars.